welcome to the deep dive. We got some fascinating research to unpack today. It's about AI in journalism, specifically ChatGPT, and how it's being perceived in Turkish media.
Yeah, this study really dives into how journalists in Turkey are thinking about AI and its implications for news.
It seems like everyone's talking about AI these days.
It really is a hot topic, and for good reason. This particular study is interesting because it goes beyond just the tech itself. It examines the views of actual media professionals in Turkey. So we get insights from journalists, editors, even a media coordinator from the Turkish presidency.
Wow, so we're getting a real on-the-ground perspective here. Not just theories, but real-world insights.
Exactly. And to give credit where credit is due, the authors are Kırık, Göksu, and Yegin. Their findings were published in the Journal of Communication Theory and Research. So if anyone wants to check it out themselves, the DOI is doi.org, 10.0.47998, ACOD.1469909.
So it's legit research, not just someone's opinion piece. Always good to know. So what's the general feeling? Are Turkish journalists embracing AI, or are they a bit wary?
Well, it's not a simple black or white answer. The study found a mix of opinions, which makes it even more interesting. Many of the people interviewed see the potential for AI to make certain tasks easier, especially those that involve a ton of data or routine reporting.
That makes sense. AI seems like it could be a real time saver for those kinds of things.
Right. And one editor even suggests that AI could help standardize fast news reporting in Turkey. Imagine that. AI helping to create a more consistent and efficient flow of news across different platforms.
That's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. But I imagine there are also concerns about, the potential downsides of using AI in journalism.
Oh, absolutely. And the study doesn't shy away from those. Many interviewees brought up ethical considerations like, can AI be truly impartial? Can it grasp the nuances of sourcing information and verifying it's accurate? And what about the potential for AI to be used to spread misinformation or manipulate public opinion?
Those are heavy questions, and I'm guessing there are no easy answers.
You're right, it's a complex landscape. And another big concern is the impact on jobs. Journalism is already a tough field, and some people worry that AI could lead to job losses.
I can see why they'd be worried. But are there any potential upsides to AI in terms of jobs?
Well, some interviewees were actually optimistic about that. They suggested that AI could create new job opportunities or allow journalists to focus on more in-depth reporting and analysis, the kind of work that really requires human skills and intuition.
So it's not necessarily a doom and gloom scenario for journalists. It's more like a shifting landscape that they'll need to adapt to.
Exactly. And speaking of adapting, that brings us to the question of journalism education. How do you prepare the next generation of journalists for a world where AI is becoming increasingly common in newsrooms?
That's a good question. I'd imagine journalism schools are having to rethink their curriculum a bit.
They are. Some educators see AI as a valuable teaching tool, helping students learn how to analyze data and understand trends. But others worry that relying too much on AI could make students less skilled in core journalistic practices, like investigative reporting and fact-checking.
It seems like finding the right balance will be key. We need to utilize the power of AI without sacrificing the essential elements of good journalism.
Couldn't agree more. And that's a theme that runs throughout the study. It's not about choosing between humans and machines. It's about figuring out how they can work together effectively and ethically.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not about fearing technology, but about understanding its limitations and using it responsibly.
Exactly. And this study, while focusing on Turkey, really highlights questions that journalists and news consumers all over the world are grappling with. It's a global conversation that we all need to be a part of.
Well, you've definitely piqued my interest. I'm eager to learn more about the specifics of this study. You mentioned that it includes perspectives from public broadcasting in Turkey, specifically TRT. What can you tell us about that?
That's where things get really fascinating. TRT has a unique role in shaping public perception, and their views on AI highlight some interesting tensions. Let's explore those next. So you're curious about the public broadcasting folks, huh? Well, the study does offer a pretty interesting look at their take on AI. One thing that stood out was their willingness to use AI for tasks like, summarizing a huge amount of information or even drafting those basic news reports, especially in a fast-paced environment like TRT.
Yeah, that makes sense. Public broadcasting often has to deal with a ton of content, so anything that can streamline those routine tasks would probably be pretty appealing. But I bet they're also worried about maintaining that journalistic integrity, right?
Yeah.
Especially with their role in informing the public.
Oh, for sure. Several of the TRT professionals really emphasize that need for human oversight, particularly when it comes to sensitive topics like politics. They were basically saying, yeah, AI can be helpful, but it shouldn't be seen as a replacement for human journalists who can add that context and nuance, and ensure the accuracy, especially when you're dealing with sources that might be biased.
So they're not like completely rejecting AI, but they're definitely approaching it with a healthy dose of caution. Seems like a good approach to me. Are there any specific examples from the study that kind of illustrate this balancing act they're talking about?
Well, one interesting perspective came from A. Nektet Tunas, an editor at TRT Haber. He acknowledges those potential benefits of AI, speeding up the news writing process and maybe even reducing those little factual errors that can slip through. But he also points out that AI wouldn't be able to capture what he calls the human dimension of certain stories.
I can definitely see that. You can have all the facts and figures in the world, but without that human element, the
Yeah.
ability to really connect with the audience on an emotional level, it's just not the same. Something's missing.
Exactly. And Abdullah Koltuk, another editor at TRT Haber, echoes that same sentiment. He sees AI as valuable for routine reporting, but when it comes to those more complex issues like bias or figuring out if a source is credible, he believes that human touch is still super important.
It's about choosing the right tool for the job, I guess.
Right.
AI might be great for like summarizing a financial report, but you wouldn't want it writing a story about a refugee crisis, something with that much human impact.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of both humans and AI. And it's not just about the creative side of journalism either. There's also that practical concern of how AI might affect jobs, especially in public broadcasting.
That's a huge concern. I bet a lot of journalists are feeling anxious about that right now. Did the study shed any light on how TRT professionals are thinking about that job security issue?
They did, and their views were actually surprisingly diverse. You've got Sini Oza Akun, for instance. He's the deputy news coordinator at TRT Heber, and he seems to think that AI could actually be beneficial for tasks like writing those simple news reports, which could, potentially free up human journalists to focus on more in-depth stuff.
I see his point, but I can't help but wonder if AI is doing all the easy work, what's left for the humans? Does it devalue their skills or something?
You're hitting on a valid concern there, and Akun does acknowledge that careful consideration of the ethics is crucial. He doesn't envision AI completely replacing human journalists, more like it's a tool that can help them do their jobs better. Kind of like how calculators changed the way mathematicians work, right? They didn't get rid of mathematicians, they just changed the way they approach problems.
That's a good analogy. So AI, if used the right way, could actually make the profession stronger, allowing journalists to do more, maybe even better work. But I'm sure not everyone is so gung-ho about AI in the newsroom. Did the study include any perspectives from people who are more skeptical?
Oh, definitely. For example, Hussein Yilmaz, the Turkey news coordinator at Anadolu Agency, he expresses some serious caution about using AI, especially when it comes to politically charged areas. He argues that human journalists bring a level of interpretation, comparison, and reasoning to those topics that AI just can't match, at least not yet.
It sounds like he's particularly worried about AI being used to manipulate public opinion or spread misinformation, which is already a big problem, especially in politics.
Yeah, and he goes even further, suggesting that the ethical guidelines that are already out there need to be updated, to specifically address the use of AI in journalism. And he also calls for clear boundaries to be set for what AI can and can't do in the newsroom. He's advocating for a very cautious and deliberate approach to implementing this technology.
That seems like a pretty reasonable stance, given the potential risks. It's clear that the folks interviewed for this study aren't just blindly accepting AI into their world. They're really wrestling with these complexities and trying to figure out how to move forward in a way that protects the integrity of journalism.
You've hit on a crucial point. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation, right? The right way to use AI in journalism seems to depend on the specific task, how sensitive the topic is, and even the values of the organization itself.
It's definitely a nuanced conversation, and I feel like it's just the beginning. This study you've shared, even though it focuses on Turkey, it brings up questions that newsrooms around the world are going to have to face as AI gets even more sophisticated.
Absolutely. And these aren't just questions for journalists to worry about either. As readers, as viewers, as citizens, we're all stakeholders in this.
Now that you mention it, I am curious to hear more about how the average person, someone like myself, should navigate this new media landscape. What should we be keeping in mind as we consume news in this age of AI?
Well, there are definitely some key things to remember as we navigate this new era of AI-influenced news. We can dive into those next. So, about navigating this AI-influenced news world, I think the first thing to remember is that AI At its core, it's a tool, right? It's only as good as the people who create it. And it carries their biases and limitations. And it definitely doesn't have that inherent understanding of truth, fairness, or, the public good the way a human journalist ideally would.
So just because an AI can spit out a perfectly written news report, it doesn't mean we should just take it as gospel truth.
Exactly. We still need that human element in the mix, that critical thinking, that ethical judgment, to make sure the information we're getting is accurate and presented responsibly.
It makes me think about all the talk about media literacy these days. That ability to really evaluate the information we're bombarded with. It seems like those skills are going to be even more crucial as AI becomes more prevalent in how news is produced.
Absolutely. We need to be savvy news consumers, no matter who or what is creating the content. Whether it's a person or an AI, we should be questioning sources, considering different perspectives, and just being aware of those potential biases that can sneak in.
So it's not about being like suspicious of everything we read, but more about being informed and engaged readers, right? Thinking critically about where the information is coming from and how it might be shaped by different factors, including AI.
You got it. And one practical tip I always give people is to diversify your news sources. Don't rely on just one outlet or platform for your information. Get a range of perspectives from reputable organizations, places with a good track record of accuracy and fairness.
That's good advice in general, but it seems especially important now with AI and those algorithms that can sometimes create echo chambers where you only see information that reinforces what you already believe.
Exactly. We've got to break out of those bubbles and expose ourselves to different viewpoints, even those we might not initially agree with. That's how we develop a more, nuanced understanding of the world and become better citizens.
This whole conversation has really given me a lot to think about. It's eye-opening to consider the future of news and how AI will shape it and my own role in that as a consumer of information. What's the one thing you really hope listeners take away from this deep dive?
I hope this conversation has encouraged everyone to think about this issue, to really engage with it. The future of news is being shaped right now, and we all have a part to play in making sure that AI makes journalism better, not worse. So ask those questions, challenge those assumptions, and stay informed. The more we know about these technologies, the better equipped we'll be to deal with this ever-changing media landscape.
Couldn't have said it better myself. To all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AI and Turkish journalism. It's a topic that affects us all, no matter where we are in the world, and it's something we'll definitely be revisiting in future episodes. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring.